This is a production of Gordon College's Scot Radio.
Scot Radio.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to the Photo Finish, Scot Radio's home for motorsports. I'm your host, Ben Schneider, and I've got a new guest for you guys tonight in the studio with me. My roommate from last year and Formula One fan, Doyoung Lee, is with us. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me onto the show. Excited to be on here, finally.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I've been trying to get you for a while, so I'm glad it finally worked out. So before we get into stuff that's been going on, we're going to cover NASCAR news from the last week and then just kind of catch up on the whole F1 season so far because it's been a while since we really got deep into that here on the show, and of course that's Stowe's main series that he follows. But you actually got the chance to go to a Formula E race this summer when they came to New York.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was in Brooklyn.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to ask you about that because I got to go in 2017, which was the first year that they came. And this series, it's kind of surprising to some people, I think, because it's only been 2 years, but it's a lot different now in a lot of ways. So I just want to ask you personally, what was your experience like? And maybe we can compare notes and talk about what we saw. But how was that?
Yeah, so it was great. I mean, the location, I think, they didn't change the track much.
I think they modified the first corner or something like that. Maybe made the track a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just beautiful right next to the river. But from when you went, it was the Gen 1 Formula E cars.
Yeah.
But now they have the Gen 2 Formula E cars, so there's no driver change into a new car.
That was always the confusing thing to explain to some people, like the pit stops. Normally they change tires, and
it's a little gimmicky, right?
Yeah, they literally hop out of their first car because their battery's dead, sprint over into the second car, get their seatbelt on and everything, and there's a minimum pit stop time to make sure that guys aren't going out there with loose seatbelts and everything. They want to make sure safety is a priority.
Yeah, I mean, the new Gen 2 Formula E cars are just absolutely amazing. I mean, they're faster. I think they just exceeded everyone's expectations because it's such a strong change from just 1 year. In 1 year, they were able to go from switching drivers in and out to having a car that can race the entire time. I mean, I feel like Formula E is a little weird for some people, though, especially with the attack mode.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, attack mode and fan boost.
Yes,
I feel like
fan boost is very...
I mean, if you listen to the show regularly, you know how I feel about NASCAR's playoffs. And I gave my whole rant on that last week. I didn't even mention, why do we call them playoffs? You don't play motor racing. You race.
Yeah, that's right.
Why do we? So you've gone so far into the stick and ball sport. I don't even. That's a. You go watch my show from last week if you want to hear all about that. But yeah, I feel like fan boost is almost worse in many respects because you're literally giving the fans. And I remember it was, I guess, the first couple seasons. It was like Sebastian Buemi and Lucas Di Grassi were always the top two. And I feel like the two guys that got fan boost I guess there were three guys that got fan boost. They were always those two, and then if it was a driver's home race, he'd have the home crowd behind him or something, or whoever the third most popular guy was. So theoretically, if you have Buemi and Di Grassi running up front so far ahead of everybody, and you give them more power, didn't the fans just vote to make the race worse? The leaders are now harder to catch.
Especially if you're a new viewer, you kind of want to root for that, top tier team. You don't want to really root for the underdog. And there was a moment where all watching the race, they kind of put it on every screen, make sure to, or before the race started, make sure you vote for your favorite race car driver so that you can give them the fan boost. And it's just, I don't know, there's something weird about that. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my guys to root for, but as a fan of a sport, I feel like, I don't feel morally what am I doing by doing that? You're literally affecting the outcome of a points paying race, because I know NASCAR's got the fan vote for the All-Star race. I know that's not too unusual with All-Star games and letting the fans take some of the guys who are maybe just on the cusp of All-Star status and giving them a say in who gets the final spots. But that's an exhibition race. This is every points paying officially sanctioned race where the fans have a decision in who gets more power.
Yeah, I mean, especially with like the attack mode where you go through specific like you need to be at a specific part of the track at this bend, at this straightaway. It seems kind of weird. It's like kind of like Mario Kart going over those speed
and if you look at Formula E's Instagram and Twitter and social media, they're constantly like they're taking Mario Kart shells and speed boosts and everything, and like taking clips from races and like photoshopping them in, and it's like. People make fun of Formula E because they're like, oh, it's just like they're trying to be real life Mario Kart, and I feel like they're embracing that in a certain respect.
I think it's a bad tactic on their part.
I guess there's an audience for it, but I feel like if you're a motorsport fan in general, like or a traditionalist, it kind of pushes you away, and maybe that's what's keeping them from kind of going to the next level in terms of having that following and having that traction.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason Formula E's race tickets are only like $12 for general and like maybe $100 for the VIP, whereas Formula One you're paying hundreds of dollars to thousands, right? Like, Formula E, I feel like needs. I don't know. Personally, I just think the attack mode and fan boosts are a little gimmicky.
Yeah, it was a neat experience for me to go. Like I had a great time when I was there. But
absolutely,
just as a series, like I've been doing this show this is the third semester now, and we've hardly ever talked Formula E on this show. You know, it's just not something that. I mean, I follow it. Like I'll watch almost every race, and just keep track of the season. But I just for whatever reason I never really have gotten into it to the point where. I cover NASCAR every week on the show, IndyCar, F1. I make sure we keep up with those as the season goes along. Formula E is not at that level to me.
Yeah, and it's a shame because they have they're engineering cars that are just absolutely brilliant, and that you can't. There's nothing like it. It's never been done before. They're kind of making these technological advancements, and I feel like they're just not able to deliver. Like that punch that people want, that just wow factor. It's just not, something's just not right where the regular Formula One watcher or like a motorsport watcher will say, oh, let me watch Formula E regularly too and follow that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if Mercedes and Porsche coming in the next couple of years, if that's like having big names and manufacturers like that will help that. And I also don't know because Lewis Hamilton's actually come under fire recently. I don't know if you've seen his Instagram posts and everything. He's very pro environment and trying to
absolutely
be a climate change advocate and going vegan and all those things. But people are pointing out he's an F1 driver. His carbon footprint is so massive. He, flies all over the world and is racing car and people have said, well, if you want to be less of a hypocrite, maybe you should go race Formula E. And Hamilton says, no, I have no interest in Formula E. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I'm someone who is also like an environmentalist and things like that. And it's just, I kind of feel conflicted being an F1 fan because I see how taxing that is and how much gas you're just burning through fuel. Everything is just so wasteful in a sense because you're burning through tires. You throw away tires. And it's just.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see, but...
Yeah, I mean, all entertainment's that way to a certain extent, right? Because, football stadiums that have night games, you got to pay electricity to, light up an entire stadium. That's a massive carbon footprint right there. So I think, people amplify that for motorsports because, you're burning gas and everything like that. But, yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear that. Like, not surprised that maybe he doesn't want to do Formula E right now just because he's on top of the F1 world, but that it's something that he would have absolutely no interest in with how much of an advocate he is for sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different type of race, so I understand that. I feel like it's almost like two different sports. It's just the driving is just not the same. The feel of the car is not the same. Just because you thrive in F1 doesn't necessarily mean you'll thrive in Formula E. I'm sure they're top quality drivers. They can transition, but
yeah. Well, John-Eric Verne, champion now. He's an F1. I mean, he was never in a good enough car, I think, to show what he could do. But he's come over, he's made Formula E his home, and
he won in Brooklyn actually.
Okay, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sam Bird won the year that I went.
Okay,
he won both races, but yeah. Then you look at Felipe Massa was this close to a world championship, won a bunch of races, and he's only had one season, so he's still getting used to it. But I think what did he have, like one podium all year or something like that? Didn't win a race, so it's a transition. So I think you look at Fernando Alonso, for example, and how great he was in F1 and how he came to IndyCar and the Indy 500 and was in contention to win it. His first year, of course, last year he had the whole debacle with the DNQ and everything, but. People are saying, oh, if he stepped into a stock car tomorrow, he could win the Daytona 500. And I don't know that people understand. And the Mayweather-McGregor fight, I think, was the same way. People would say,
that's
well,
right.
if you say, like, okay, Michael Phelps versus LeBron James, you would ask, is it in a swimming pool or on a basketball court? But maybe that's not fair because there's not as much overlap between those two sports. But, when you have guys who are at that level, the differences are there, and everybody is so trained to their particular series, their particular sport, that if you have just the slightest change in what you're used to, even if maybe the motions are the same or the general activity that you're doing is the same, you're going to be behind.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I wonder if there's ever going to be an overlap between F1, Formula E, maybe even IndyCar, to a further extent where there's multiple drivers racing multiple.
Yeah, well, they've tried a couple
sports.
of those things, right? I remember IROC was really big back in the 90s, early 2000s, and of course that series has been dead for a while now, but that was skewed heavily towards NASCAR. Most of the races were on NASCAR ovals. More than half the field were NASCAR champions. But the Race of Champions is still, I guess, the closest thing that we have to that.
Yeah.
I remember Sebastian Vettel racing Kyle Busch a couple of years ago over there down in Miami. But yeah, I think that would be interesting to see. Put everybody in neutral cars, the exact same car, prepared by the same company, and see what they can do.
This is purely hypothetical. Do you potentially see a merge between Formula E and Formula One, especially with a lot of climate change movements, a lot of environmental movements?
Yeah, well, they're talking about that. F1's
Hybrids,
gone
maybe?
hybrid. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I know Richard Branson, who of course is big with Virgin and everything, and they've got a team. He was predicting that in 10 years Formula E would overtake Formula One in terms of popularity, and I was like, I don't know about that. But I could see Formula One going more down that direction of trying to be more sustainable and environmentally conscious. But I feel like, part of the complaints, it's funny, we've got this race in Miami that they're trying to get off the ground. And all the locals are complaining, it's bad for the environment and the cars are going to be too loud.
Yeah.
And all the diehard F1 fans who grew up with the V10s and everything that are now having to deal with the V6 turbos are saying, the cars aren't loud enough. What are you going to do when the new regulations come in to make the cars louder?
Yeah.
So that's just kind of funny to me how the yahoos in Miami who don't know what they're talking about are on their soapbox saying the cars are too loud, and the fans are saying the cars are too quiet, But
I mean, the engines have got smaller. They have much more better. They have better battery life. They have all the different, kind of switching off power saving modes, things like that.
Yeah. But then you go to a Formula E race and it's like, I mean, it's not silent. The engines make noise. But,
definitely.
You don't need
the
you don't need the headphones that you need if you're going to
that's
a
true.
NASCAR race or an F1 race. So yeah, but I guess you had a good experience there. I saw
that was
amazing. Did you get to go into the VIP area during the podium celebrations and everything?
I don't know how this happened, but somehow I just started following the crowd. They're like, end of race party is this way. And all of a sudden, I'm standing right in front of the podium, and we see Jean-Eric walking up to the podium. Sebastian Buemi's nearby. They're everyone's just there. And they're spraying champagne on me, and I'm just having the greatest time of my life. So that was my first race ever, motorsport race, and I mean, that was just pure awesomeness. I just can't say anything more than that. I want to go to a Formula One race though.
Yeah. I would too.
I want to hear those engines go.
Yeah, they were so close to getting a street race in New Jersey, which is actually very, very close to where the Brooklyn Street Circuit is now. But that never quite got off the ground. But if they were to get that, there, like I would have gone. I would have been going every year if that were like a summer race that they had.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, like I think actually the race in Canada might be even a little bit closer in terms of miles than down in Austin.
Yeah, I mean the one in the one in Canada is actually not too far. I looked into it. Like honestly, if like maybe in a year or two, I definitely would like want to go.
Yeah.
It's not that far to get there.
Yeah, it's definitely on my bucket list to get to one of those races. But yeah, so that was Do's trip to Brooklyn for the Formula E race. I'm going to run through some NASCAR stuff as quickly as I can here, though I know it's not as much your thing. You can feel free to chime in if you want. But first, I want to send my best wishes to Matt Tifft, who drives for Front Row Motorsports. He had a seizure, apparently, is what the diagnosis was this weekend. Couldn't race, and Matt Crafton ended up filling in for him. He took to social media to give an update today, and he's focusing on his health. He's sitting out the rest of the season. So John Hunter Nemechek, who drives in the Xfinity Series for GMS Racing, is going to step into that car for the last 3 races of a year, and he put out a statement saying, look, this is not how any driver would want to make his debut in the Cup Series, but I'm thankful for the opportunity, and I want to send my best wishes to Matt and make sure he takes care of his health, and I want to do the same. So we're all pulling for Matt, and hope he can get back in the car next season. And K&M West was at Kern County, and it was basically the Derek Kraus show. Derek led every lap from pole en route to the win. He's in the same position that Sam Mayer was in going into Dover in K&N East, where he basically just has to take the green flag and he'll have a championship clinch. The field is short enough where there's not going to be any possibility where he could be overtaken even if he wrecks on the first lap. So Kraus has locked up a championship there. I think it's absolutely well-deserved, and I actually saw somebody was asking why don't we have 4 drivers going for a championship in the final race, and the response, I think, was pretty overwhelming in that this is how a lot of fans wish it were still in the top 3 series. Derek Kraus has been far and away the most dominant. Jagger Jones, Trevor Huddleston, Haley Deegan, Brittany Zamora, all those drivers, they've had their moments here and there, but it's when you think of who should be the champion this year, the answer is obvious, and it's the guy who's run away with a points lead and has been the most dominant. I think he's led every lap 3 times this year. So it's really nobody's deserving of this championship other than the guy who's going to get it. So I want to give my congratulations to Derek and the whole BMR team over in K&M West. So the Truck Series and Cup Series were in Martinsville, and we'll start with the truck race. And this was a fantastic race, I have to say. A lot of action all throughout. And the entertainment factor was there as well because we saw trouble for pretty much every playoff driver except Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain was able to finish second. Everybody else either got caught in a wreck. I know Matt Crafton had motor problems or electrical problems or whatever. And Todd Gilliland won the race for Kyle Busch Motorsports. It was his first career win, and we didn't get to see it because the Fox broadcast cut out right before the final restart, was out for the final 2 laps. Came back at the very end, so we saw the tail end of Todd Gilliland's burnout. And then they were running long with the race, so they cut straight to college football. And I was so infuriated as a viewer. I feel like this is the most disrespect motorsports has gotten from a broadcaster in a long time. And, Dill, actually, I want to ask you, I don't know if you remember the Australian Grand Prix in 2018 when the rights went over to ESPN.
Yep.
That was their first broadcast. And they had basically, I guess, the opposite problem that FS1 had. There was video feed for a little while, but there was no audio.
Yeah.
Which was even worse because, Sky Sports in the UK has audio, and all ESPN has to do is literally simulcast their coverage. And we weren't even getting that. I wrote a whole
ridiculous.
I wrote a whole blog piece on that because it was so bad, and I felt like I had to say something about that. This might have been worse because I feel like at least ESPN got their act together. They got the race up and running, and sure, the commercials in the middle were bad and poorly timed, but we missed the entire finish here with no explanation. And the college football guys, they didn't go back and say, well, we apologize for the technical difficulty. Here's what you missed. They just said, we apologize for those of you who are missing the NASCAR race, but we're here for football, so we're going to cover the football game. And you can catch a replay of the race on FS2 tomorrow morning, but
I mean that's kind of ridiculous. I can't for any fan of any sport imagine.
I can't believe how far that network has fallen, because it started out as Speed Vision and this whole channel dedicated primarily to motorsports, and then Fox buys it in the early 2000s, and you can tell NASCAR was still peaking at its boom, and they made it a very NASCAR heavy network, and slowly but surely, as NASCAR's kind of declined, the network has kind of declined, and then the network no longer existed because they made it, sports in general network for Fox and FS1. And, nowadays we have these truck broadcasts where half the time they don't even send the reporters to the track or the broadcasters to the track. They're in the studio in Charlotte covering the race and calling it from the monitors. They were at the track in Martinsville, which I guess is good. But I feel like we're getting that sense that Fox almost, I'm sure there are individual people there working on the broadcast that care, but the higher-ups maybe don't care as much. The people in charge of the decisions don't care. But I'll say this. ESPN was so remorseful for that awful coverage that they hired Mother's Polish and signed them to be the exclusive presenter of Formula One coverage here in the United States. So F1 fans, if you're listening, if you haven't gone out and bought some Mother's Polish, go do so to show them your gratitude, because Sky Sports does the races commercial-free in the UK. ESPN's doing the same here. And if you guys have listened to this show last year with the whole Bob Pockras firing and everything, you know how we feel about how ESPN feels about motor racing. If they can broadcast the races commercial-free, if they can own up to it that much, I hope Fox got the message from all of that backlash and will prove to us that they care enough to fix something.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we'll get to NBC in a second, too, because, I don't want to harp on Fox too much, because NBC is, just as bad in many respects. At least they show us the race most of the time. But, let's talk about the Cup race. I have to say, I know some fans will disagree, but I have no idea how the yes option won in Jeff Gluck's weekly poll. Was this a good race? I feel like, especially for Martinsville, very subpar race. I don't know, maybe being there would have helped, but on TV, it just saw that we have this issue with the giant spoilers and everything, and this package, you can't pass. And, it's difficult to pass for position because of how much clean air matters. So when the leader has clean air, it's virtually impossible to pass for the lead. And Martin Truex Jr. proved that. I forget exactly how many laps he led. I feel like it was 460 or something ridiculous of the 500. And it was very similar to Brad Keselowski in the spring. And the last time somebody led that many laps at Martinsville, I think, was in the 70s, maybe. We had that happen at both races this year. So I feel like that says something about the package. Maybe NASCAR should take note of that. But not much of a storyline there other than Truex dominating and getting redemption for the incident with Joey Logano last year. Joey Logano in another incident this year. He was actually in a bit of a fight on pit road with Denny Hamlin. They got together with some on-track contact, and Logano kind of tapped Hamlin or gave him a light shove as they were talking about the issue. Everything was civil, and Logano kind of shoves Hamlin, walks away, and then a fight breaks out among the pit crew members, and one of Logano's crewmen actually, kind of horse collar tackled Hamlin from behind and threw him down to the pavement, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. You can talk about, should drivers get involved, should crew members get involved, but anytime something like that happens, I feel like, you need to suspend them for a year at the very least. And I'm glad NASCAR at least took action this time, but I still don't think they went far enough. They suspended that crew member for the race at Texas this weekend, and that was it. So I would have liked to have seen him sit for at least the rest of the season. But that's just me. I'm sure a lot of people would share that sentiment, though. But then I want to talk about NBC because, I don't want to give the perception that, Fox is so bad, so therefore NBC's coverage is amazing. I feel like Austin Dillon is the better driver of the Dillon brothers than Ty, but that doesn't mean Austin Dillon's a good driver. He's had, arguably the worst season of his career this year. So I think NBC's coverage, if you ask me who I prefer, NBC or Fox, I would definitely say NBC. I think there are some great people at NBC. I think NBC's had some great broadcasts this year. There are a lot of things about their coverage that I like. I love their dedication to motorsports as a whole. They're airing hours upon hours of coverage every day on NBCSN. Some people have even said it's kind of taken over the Motorsports Authority label that Speed Channel had. But I want to just make note of NBC's post-race show, a NASCAR America Victory Lap, because they have a segment of that show where you can call in as a fan and talk about issues going on during the race. And some of the calls and, quote, burning questions that came up this week were, Penske needs to get rid of Joey Logano. That was what Bob from Tennessee had to say. Also, Levi from Virginia just said, Kyle Busch is a bad sport with his conflict there with Eric Almirola. Those aren't questions. I feel like I'm sure there are far more people than that with better things to say that are calling into NBC. And yet these are the calls that they've chosen to take. So I don't know if that says about NBC's production team, the people making the decisions to take those calls. I don't know if they're just trying to play on the drama a little bit or what their reasoning is. But, let's talk about, Martin Truex Jr. just won the race. He's locked into Homestead. He can relax the next 2 weeks. How big of an advantage is that? Texas and Homestead are both 1.5 miles. Can he gather any data from Texas now, not having to worry about going out and winning the race because he's locked in already? Who should the favorites be at Texas and Phoenix to join Truex in the championship for? Who are your picks for that? Let's analyze the race. Let's talk about the championship. Let's not say, oh, I don't like Joey because he got into it with Hamlin and he's a, bad sport, so he ought to be fired. Joey Logano's a reigning champion. He knows how to drive a car. There's no way Penske's going to fire him for, you're just being ridiculous at that point. So I wish NBC would take more appropriate calls if we're going to have a discussion about the race. I don't really see the point in taking those questions. But yeah, it begs the question. We've had problems as fans with both Fox and NBC this year. We're halfway through the TV contracts at the end of this season. It's been a while since CBS broadcast any motorsports, but I feel like they had some of the best coverage back in the day, so I'd love to see them come back. I don't know about ESPN coming back. I know a lot can change in 5 years, because 5 years ago they were broadcasting races themselves. So maybe they could get a crew back if they like what they see with F1. I wouldn't mind seeing NBC stay on. I feel like there are problems at NBC that need to be addressed, but I admire their commitment and dedication to motorsports, but I do worry about a monopoly forming sometimes, because I saw people saying, Fox is so terrible, that truck race was embarrassing and laughable, and NBC should just broadcast the whole season. And I feel like when you have one network taking the entire season, there's no competition. There's no one to measure yourself against. There's nobody you think, well, they're doing this. This is the standard that they've set. We have to match that and hopefully exceed that. If NBC, and I think we saw that to a certain extent with their IndyCar coverage this year, which wasn't terrible by any means. It was still enjoyable, and Lee Diffie's a great play-by-play man, and you've got great analysts there. And the coverage, I think, was generally speaking pretty good. But I feel like we saw, production-wise, NBC kind of relax a little bit. And, of course, we had the issue at St. Pete where the video feed cut out, much like what happened to Fox this weekend. It's just little things like that when they pile up, they can start to get pretty annoying and frustrating as a viewer. But this was the first year that NBC had every race. ABC had 5 or 6 races, including the Indy 500. NBC had the rest. There was competition. Both networks had to be on their game and make sure that they were, putting out a quality product. Whereas if you're the only one, you have nobody to measure yourself against. So I feel like you need at least 2 broadcasters. And that's something I'd like to see in trucks as well, because I know Fox is the entire truck schedule. So that's what I'd like to see going forward with the new TV contracts that are going to come out in a few years. And we do have some big IndyCar news I want to get to really quickly. James Hinchcliffe is out at the new Aero Schmidt-Peterson McLaren Chevrolet team. And, of course, if you've seen a Honda commercial in the last year, you probably know who James Hinchcliffe is, because he's the face of Honda here in the United States, particularly with IndyCar, but also with the Honda USA brand as a whole. So, of course, Doe, I'm sure with McLaren and Honda's breakdown over in F1. That was going to be pretty awkward with them coming over to IndyCar full-time and partnering with a Honda-based team. So their only choice really was to run Chevy engines, and that kind of left Hinchcliffe in an awkward situation. But he had mentioned working with General Motors in the past, and he was excited to work with them again. And Zach Brown said, he doesn't have to worry. We're going to fill out the contract. He's going to be fine. He's going to run the season with us as expected. Now it's no longer the case. And, there's a whole bunch of reasons people are speculating for that. I won't go too deep into those because I know we want to talk about the F1 season. But basically, all you need to know is going to be a two-car team as expected. Pato O'Ward is going to drive one car, so that's exciting for him. He's been released of his Red Bull junior contract. Just there wasn't much space available over there for him to get an F2 or potentially even F1 opportunity. So he's coming back to IndyCar. If they parted ways mutually, there's no hard feelings there with him or Red Bull. And Oliver Askew, the Indy Lights champion who won the Freedom 100 this year, I think is one of the best young drivers in American open wheel racing today. He's going to be in the second car. So that's really exciting for him. And I'm glad to see him get a full-time opportunity. And Alonso, this hasn't been officially confirmed, but I guess it's all but confirmed that he'll be back. He's trying to win a Triple Crown. I can't imagine that he would give up the opportunity to come to the Indy 500 again. So I'm sure they'll bring that third car back for him. All right, so let's get into the F1 season. Let's just kind of recap everything from the very beginning. Preseason testing, I know Ferrari were very excited because they were on top. And even Lewis Hamilton was saying, they should be considered the favorites and they have a half-second advantage per lap. And then we get to the first 5 races of the year and Mercedes go 1-2 in all 5, which had never been done before. Yes, and Ferrari once again cannot deliver. I mean, what was it, 28 last year, Vettel, they were like Vettel favorites of the season. He's going to do amazing. He's going to do this. What was it? Germany. Yeah, I mean, he just seems to not have been delivering for Ferrari. Yeah, well, it was, I guess, drizzling, the weather was. And he was left out there on slicks and all by himself just ran off the track, into the gravel, into the wall. The race was over, and Hamilton won from 14th on the grid. Yep. At his home race. Yes. And he'll tell you, actually, that Singapore last year was the turning point of the championship, not Germany. And I was like, come on, Seb. That was embarrassing. You were embarrassed. You were ashamed. You were cursing on the radio because you were so upset. You apologized to your team. It was Germany. That was a turning point. Yep. Yeah, but there didn't have to be a turning point this year because the Mercedes were fast right out of the get-go, and Ferrari were overhyped once again. Yep, that's right. Mercedes continues to just deliver. Yep. Hamilton is literally at the top of this game right now. He's just absolutely killing it. Yeah, first time ever that the same team 6 years in a row was going to get both the drivers' and constructors' championships. Yeah, I mean... Yeah. Ferrari had 5 in the early 2000s with Schumacher, but... It's a new era right now. Hamilton, Mercedes, Silver Arrows. Well, era. People talk about the Patriots dynasty, 6 Super Bowls in, whatever, I guess 18 seasons. That Mercedes have 6 titles in 6 seasons. So, that's and then the Bulls dynasty in the 90s with Jordan 6 and 8 years. 6 in a row is just unbelievable. Yep. And Lewis could easily have 6 in a row. Rosberg just barely beat him in 2016. If his engine doesn't go, and I don't want to take anything away from Rosberg. He had a great year too, but if his engine doesn't fail in Malaysia, he could easily be on the verge of his 6th consecutive and 7th overall championship. So, which would tie him with Schumacher. And speaking of approaching Schumacher's records, Lewis won in Mexico this week. He didn't clinch the title, though, because Bottas had a strong race as well. But it's now to the point where Bottas has to win every race and Lewis has to DNF every race for him to win the championship, which is highly unlikely. Yeah, no, not going to happen. So, he hasn't mathematically clinched it yet, but it's probably going to happen here in the States. So, this weekend. His 83rd win, which, just a few years ago, people were saying, we talk about unbreakable records in F1. Schumi's 91 wins. That's not going anywhere anytime soon. And now Hamilton's 8 wins away from that. I think he's going to get to at least 84. You know, I think he has to be the favorite to go out and win this weekend in Austin. And I don't know. I mean, we've seen him, like, I think back to 2015, he clinched it in the United States. I mean, Rosberg won the last 3 races in a row. So, you know, sometimes I think once he's clinched the championship, you know, he kind of relaxes for a little bit and then presses hard with a new charge next season. So I think we'll get to at least 84. Whether or not he gets to 85 or 86 in these last 3 races is, I think, very much debatable because I'm sure Ferrari, you know, I think it finally caught Mercedes to give their drivers a chance to win, even though obviously they're out of a championship by now. You know, Verstappen's obviously going to be very strong for Red Bull, and maybe even Albon. Who knows? And we'll talk about the Red Bull driver swap here in a second as well.
Talk about that.
But yeah, you know, I think if you look at new regulations, they're not going to come in until 21, so we're going to have at least one more season where you wouldn't expect things to change too much. Lewis is averaging 10 wins a year. You know, by the law of averages, he should do it next year. He should break Michael's records.
Yeah. I mean, Hamilton is really killing it. I mean, I can't see any other team pulling through and just completely surpassing Mercedes. I just don't think it's possible. I mean, Ferrari, I mean, they were...
Yeah, I think if Ferrari and Vettel... Because I don't see Vettel leaving Ferrari. I think if he's going to win another championship, I think he wants to win it with Ferrari.
But Leclerc is I feel like they're.
So
I mean,
that's
both of them
actually the next thing I have here. Do you think is Leclerc a new number 1 over there?
I mean, I think he is.
Because I feel like that would be the smart move for Ferrari if you're talking about a driver, you know, and we could get into team orders and the whole politics there. But that's just the reality of what F1 is sometimes. You know, if they're ever in that position. Who should Ferrari prioritize? I think it's Leclerc.
Yeah,
you know, he's
I
younger.
agree.
I think he's got, you know, Vettel, I think it's safe to say, is probably out of his prime. You know, he went through that long winless streak, second half of last year and the first half of this year. You know, I don't know if he's ever going to be that Red Bull champion that he was, you know, just a handful of years ago. Whereas Leclerc, I think, has all the upside in the world, is only going to get better. You know, he's obviously having a breakout year this year, his first year with Ferrari.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just great to see Leclerc just really thrive. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about Red Bull now.
Sure, yeah. Let's get into Red Bull. So, season started with Pierre Gasly getting the promotion from Toro Rosso, which I think, you know, I actually saw Gasly race. Gasly was in the Formula E race that I went to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So what happened was there was a conflict with World Endurance Championship. You know, those two series, they're both sanctioned by the FIA. So a lot of drivers like to participate in both series. But it got to the point where there was a schedule conflict with a race in New York, and I forget where. I feel like they were in Germany. World Endurance Championship was, but whatever. There was a conflict. So drivers had to choose which race to run. And Buemi was so far ahead in the championship that he thought he'd go run World Endurance Championship. So he forfeited all those points, but Renault had to find a replacement driver, and they ended up going with Pierre Gasly. So that was when Gasly got his break in Formula E. And he did quite well. He almost finished on the podium in the second race and actually crashed as he was crossing the finish line. He still finished 4th, so a good result for him. But yeah, it looked good with Toro Rosso. I thought was the natural choice to move up with Ricciardo leaving. But then we got into this season, and I don't know if just the car that Red Bull built just doesn't fit his driving style, but, you know, Verstappen's out here competing for wins and poles and, you know, running strong and weekly threat for the podium. I forget how many races he went without finishing outside the top 5, which I think he was close to a record for that. Gasly didn't get a single podium.
Yeah, I mean, with Ricciardo leaving, I think Gasly was kind of rushed into this position. I don't think he would. I mean, it was very unexpected because last year we hear Red Bull saying, yes, Ricciardo is staying. We're hoping to keep him here at Red Bull. And obviously that's not the case as he's at Renault now. But I think Gasly just could. I don't know what it is because obviously number, stat sheet, whatever, it looks good on paper. But we get to the season and it's just not there. And I mean, obviously Albon was. I think Albon was the right choice
over Kvyat.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, because I See,
I
don't know
feel
about
conflicted.
that. Like, not that I think Albon's done a fine job so far. I could easily see him getting a podium in one of these last few races. And actually, I don't know if you saw somebody put out a stat on social media today, like points since the driver swap. And I think Albon has like 58 for Red Bull, and Verstappen only has like it's in the 30s, I think. So and you think of Max's race this week in Mexico, which was basically over on the first lap with the puncture and everything.
That was ridiculous.
Yeah. So I mean that's potentially 25 points right there. But yeah, and I had to laugh in Germany because that race was a mess. You had Lance Stroll leading at one point.
I don't know.
Yeah, people were turning on the channel, like having no idea, and they see a racing point in the lead, and it's like, what in the world? And both Mercedes are out of the points, and Kubica has scored a point for Williams after the Alphas got DQ'd, which, and we'll get into Williams here in a second as well in the season that they've had. But
oh man,
yeah, we get to Germany, and Gasly just has another terrible race, and Kvyat gets a podium for Toro Rosso. Rosso hasn't been on the podium in over a decade. And he got a podium before Gasly did.
I mean, I wonder if Red Bull is trying to create or is trying to build up their new standout driver,
Yeah.
And I think Albon is the right choice for that. Because, I've been reading some things, talks about Verstappen potentially leaving. I don't know if it's going to happen, 2021 maybe.
Yeah, well, I know Verstappen wants to be, I think, the youngest champion. He wants to break Vettel's record for that. He's running out of time to do that, and I just don't know if Red Bull can offer him like I think if he went to Mercedes, he could easily rival Lewis.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Red Bull is quite at that point yet where they could offer him that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where Kvyat's going to go. I don't know because who wants to be at Toro Rosso for
especially a driver of Kvyat's age, right? Because this is his
that's
second.
Not a...
The guy, you gotta love it. The guy goes to Toro Rosso, gets promoted to Red Bull again. I think maybe promoted a little bit early, with Vettel leaving for Ferrari. But then, and I think a lot of people actually forget this, in 2015, Kvyat actually scored more points than Ricciardo. I think Kvyat had like 95, Ricciardo had 92. If I recall correctly. So he actually, and of course, Red Bull had a down year that year. They were behind Williams in the constructors. Williams were third and Red Bull were fourth, which, what does that tell you when you think of the two teams today? But not a good year for them. But then, Kvyat has a couple of, bad races to start the season. And his home Grand Prix in Russia doesn't go so well, and then he gets dropped to Toro Rosso. Like, they're ruthless over at Red Bull.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the heck they're doing over there,
yeah.
To be honest. Ricciardo left. I mean, he left for a reason, because, Red Bull's just got this almost like a bad company culture in a sense. It's just, they're so cutthroat, they will drop you to Toro Rosso. They don't care.
Yeah. Well, their driver development program is so boom or bust. It's boom if you're Vettel, it's bust if you're a Sebastian Bourdais or somebody like that. But yeah, Kvyat. So he goes to Toro Rosso. He gets promoted to Red Bull. He gets dropped back to Toro Rosso. He gets dropped entirely. Then he comes back to Toro Rosso because Gasly's still running Super Formula in Japan. He's got a schedule conflict, so they need to replace him for a race, so he's back at Toro Rosso. Then he gets dropped again. Then he gets dropped permanently. Then he goes to be a test driver for Ferrari. Yeah. So you think maybe that's his new career opportunity.
Oh, man.
But then Brendan Hartley gets dropped from Toro Rosso, and Red Bull's like, we don't have enough drivers right now. Hey, Daniel, you want to come back and and race Toro Rosso? So he's back at Toro Rosso now. And he gets a podium at Germany.
I mean, I don't understand how he's able to deal with that. Obviously, the man wants to race, so he's going to race no matter what.
Sure, yeah, of course.
But for a driver, his age especially, that must feel absolutely just terrible for him. He's kind of getting thrown around. He's just being used straight up by Red Bull.
Yeah. I don't know what their plans are for him, because I feel like this was his chance, and if I were in charge, I feel like, Kvyat has more experience. Albon's just a rookie. He got the podium in Germany. I feel like I would have, at least for this season, gone with Kvyat. And, if he does well, great, we'll keep him in the car next year. If he doesn't, then we'll maybe look at giving Albon a seat. But they went with Albon. I think it's worked out for them fairly well. I know he doesn't have a podium yet either, but he's come a lot closer than Gasly has. He's gotten up to speed more. So we'll see how that works out for them. But yeah, just the culture over there is very ruthless.
I mean,
in so many ways.
Theoretically, or just, from a purely just fan standpoint, I would have liked to see Kvyat go up there.
Yeah.
But I could never imagine Red Bull. I'm not surprised that they made the decision that they did.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great to see Kvyat get another big break. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens over there. So your driver, Daniel Ricciardo, of course, he made the switch to Renault this season, and I think he knew this was going to be a long-term process. Maybe Renault being a full works team, they had more to offer than Red Bull could in the future was his mindset. But he's been plagued with more engine problems and mechanical problems there, and it's not been a great year. He's kind of level with Hülkenberg, his teammate, in points. And I don't know if maybe you want to give an opinion on this. Both of them actually got disqualified after the fact in Japan.
I mean, I kind of thought, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm biased because I'm a Ricciardo fan, but I think it was kind of ridiculous.
You think so?
I mean, they talk about the sister. It just doesn't make sense to me. I just feel like, how could you disqualify them for that? The way it was presented, also to the stewards, I think it seems kind of shady. Yeah. It seems kind of petty.
To have another team come forward and say, "Hey, this doesn't look right. You should look into it." Okay, we'll look into it, and then they disqualify.
Yeah,
it.
I mean, just the whole process of how that happened just doesn't feel right with me. I mean, if the stewards came, someone inspecting the cars, he said something's not right here.
Yeah, and I think Renault, because they didn't appeal, which I guess good for them. But they also said it. We don't agree with the penalty, even though we're not going to appeal it. And they said you can argue whether it broke the rules or not. It didn't give our drivers an advantage, I think was their argument, which is why they shouldn't have been disqualified. And you look at the results, it's not like Ricciardo pulled a podium out of nowhere and had the race of his life. I don't think there was any reason to be suspicious just looking at he finished 6th, Hülkenberg was 10th. That's right where you would expect Renault to be, fighting for the best of the rest in the midfield. So. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any opinions on Ricciardo making that decision? Do you think it could work out for him in the long run?
I mean, I think I understand his thought process. I mean, Red Bull is ruthless. I don't know. I don't think a driver like Ricciardo would want to stay there anyways. But I feel like Renault just hasn't been delivering from their side. And if I was Ricciardo, I'd be extremely frustrated right now. And you can tell he's frustrated. He wants a little bit more boost. He wants to get a little bit faster, but he just can't.
Yeah. If you ask a lot of people who's the best driver in the sport right now without a world championship, I think a lot of people would say Ricciardo.
Yeah.
Because he's shown those flashes of brilliance in the past. He's just never had the car to be able to give him that opportunity.
Yeah, give him that Mercedes, and he'll show you.
Yeah, sure. Well, you could say that about a lot of drivers.
That is true. That is true.
Give them the Mercedes and see what they can do. See if they could give Lewis a run for his money.
Do you see in 2021 any, car
I don't know what could... Well,
because they're talking about a lot of these new designs. I'm looking at these designs and I'm like, they honestly look like cars of just supercars.
Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do, but I don't know. Like Braun GP, you think 2009 Braun GP didn't exist a month before the season began, and then they come up with a whole double diffuser thing. And it's a loophole in the rules, and they go out and dominate right from the start. And people catch up to them eventually, but by then, Button's so far out in points that he's clinched a championship. Yep. So, if a team, Braun GP bought the team from Honda for literally £1, and if they can pull a championship out of there, and then sold it to Mercedes for a bunch of money, and that's the Mercedes team we know and love today. So they have a 100% successful championship rate. Which is kind of crazy to think about. The only team in F1 history that can say that, right?
Yeah, that is crazy.
If they can do that with a change in the regulations, I think all sorts of things are possible. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Williams, or Haas come out of nowhere, and we'll get to those two teams here in a second as well, because they've had, quite frankly, terrible seasons.
Oh man.
But I could see anybody ending up there, and I feel like you're still going to see Mercedes competitive at the very least. Ferrari will be the same way, but if you look at 2007, 2008, it was pretty much all McLaren, all Ferrari, all of its, like maybe BMW was up there a little bit. But those were your big two teams. And then 2009 comes along, and it's definitely more Brawn and Red Bull. And I think Ferrari won a race with Kimi, and McLaren won a race or two with Hamilton. But they were nowhere near the championship level caliber teams that they were just a year before, because everybody kind of got a fresh start with the rule changes. So, I mean, I could see anybody finding a way up there, up the ladder to compete. I don't know if it's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes dominance just continues, or if it's somebody like Ferrari or Red Bull, who we would maybe expect, or Renault with maybe their bigger budget, if that gives them an opportunity to make some gains. McLaren, I don't know. That team's had an interesting few years, to say the least. But we'll see. I'm excited for where the sport is going. I feel
absolutely.
like, who knows what's going to happen. But so I want to ask you, do you know of the whole Rich Energy saga at all with Haas and the sponsorship?
Yeah.
Because Rich Energy is like, it's you look at their Twitter page, it seems like a parody account, some of the stuff that they were posting.
It's kind of, I don't know. I mean, I remember you first showing me that, and I was like, I thought it was some sort of joke, a prank.
Yeah. Well, there was some point during the summer they said, or their Twitter account said, or whatever, we're breaking our contract with Haas. We aim to be beating Red Bull on and off the track, because they're also an energy drink.
It's kind of funny.
And we were behind Williams in Austria. Like, it's unacceptable, But, and I think it's, in a lot of ways it is. Haas were, arguably, along with Renault, the best of the rest last year. And you look at where they are this year, it's like night and day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought Haas would be this breakout team.
Yeah.
And they've just
with this
kind of gone down.
Yeah, with this Rich Energy deal, maybe that brings some momentum. And it brought just the opposite. It brought a comedy of off-track scandals with the whole company. And I don't even, have you ever seen a can of Rich Energy?
No,
does it exist?
I don't know. I don't know where this money's coming from. I feel like it needs some sort of audit.
Yeah, the drink definitely exists. People have ordered it online, and, some people say it tastes like absolute crap. But, it seemed from the start like it was a shady sponsorship deal. It reminds me of DC Solar here in NASCAR, with that whole deal with Ross Chastain getting screwed over. And, that was a massive entity. Warren Buffett had, I think it was $340 million invested into that company, and then the FBI raids it over the holidays, and it's all gone. So that's probably the biggest loss Buffett's ever taken in his life. But yeah, just something about that deal just didn't seem right from the start. But you think, sponsorship aside, I just don't know what happened with Haas. I can't figure Grosjean out. I feel like
he's so inconsistent.
Yeah, when he is on top form, I feel like he could be a race-winning caliber driver in the right car. I don't know if Haas could quite give him that car yet. But he had a couple of runner-ups when he was with Lotus. I feel like he's a good driver, but he just makes so many mental errors and mistakes, and they're so common that you can't really be surprised when they happen.
Yeah, I mean he's frankly just crashing all the time.
Yeah, I think he leads. Yeah, I'm just looking at the results here. He leads all drivers, but he's got 7 retirements this year, and I don't know that all of those have been crashes. But that's not something you want to be leading in if you're in Formula One.
What do you think his future looks like, though?
Well, I think he's back with Haas next year. Right? Didn't they confirm that they're keeping the driver lineup? Which
actually no, I did read that.
It's crazy because we're coming on the 5th season now, or 4th season, I guess, rather, right? Because Gutierrez was driving for Haas their first season. But if they fulfill that contract through the end of next year, it's going to be like the 4th or 5th longest lasting pair of teammates at a team in F1 history, which just amazes me that a team like Haas would have.
I know. I would think that
you would think there would be more rotation.
Exactly.
With a team like that. You might expect it from Ferrari if they're on top, or Mercedes if they're on top, and if their drivers are happy. You don't want to change anything up. Vettel and Webber lasted at Red Bull for 5 years. I'm sure Rosberg would still be at Mercedes if he hadn't won that championship. I'm still sure he'd still be trying to beat Lewis, and who knows what F1 would look like today if Rosberg hadn't retired. But they'd be going on 7 seasons now by the end of his year as teammates. But for Haas to have a team pairing like that, and it hasn't always been sunshine and roses, with those two at Haas. They've had some issues.
I don't know. I kind of don't know what their strategy is, what they're trying to accomplish here. I just frankly don't know. Do they even have a future in F1? I mean,
yeah, that's true because Gene Haas comes from NASCAR, and in NASCAR, there's a lot more parity, a lot more teams can win. Haas partnered with Tony Stewart, and their teams won a championship now, and they're in the fight. Championships actually, Stewart in 11, Harvick in 14. They're in the fight every year. It's hard, and again, rule changes in a couple years, who knows? But it's hard for me to envision Haas ever getting to that point where they could be a team that takes the fight to Mercedes or Ferrari. A lot of people say Red Bull is to Toro Rosso how Ferrari is to Haas. I don't see that really happening for them in the immediate future, at least.
Yeah.
We've just got a couple minutes left here, so real quick, what do you have to say about Williams? I mean, it's
absolute garbage.
Yeah. What can you say about that team right now?
It's just they're in a slump, and it just seems that they can't get themselves out.
Yeah, and it's sad. I feel like the Kubica comeback story was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like it's hard to deny at this point that he's not the same driver that he was before the accident, and he's been behind George Russell pretty consistently this year. He does have a point, though, with that crazy race in Germany, and Russell can't say that, so he's got that going for him at least. But yeah, he's not going to be back with the team next year. It's already been announced, but I think they need a lot more changes over there than just their driver pairing. I don't know what it's going to take for that team, and it's sad, like you said, because there's so much history there. And back in the '90s, they were Mercedes. You think everybody talked about Mercedes 1-2s to start the year. They broke Williams' record. That was their record in '92. They had 3 1-2 finishes to start the season. And
losing Williams would be very devastating to the sport.
Yeah, and you have to think with how poorly they're running, they're not bringing in as much revenue and prize money.
Yeah.
I don't think that team's too big to go under, if they have enough seasons in a row like this. And McLaren, quite frankly, were the same way. When it was looking like in 2015, 2017, when they were 9th in the Constructors, how are they even managing to exist, to be quite honest? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. But I hope they can get out of the slump.
Yeah, I hope Williams just do something.
Yeah.
God, send a miracle to Williams, please.
I agree. Yeah, so thank you for coming on, Doe. It's been great. Of course, you've got an open offer anytime you want to come on after a race weekend. Yeah, maybe we can have you back to wrap up the season or something later in the year. But yeah, that's going to be it for this week's show. Next week, NASCAR and F1 actually are both in Texas. How ironic is that? Sydney Series and Cup Series at Texas Motor Speedway. F1 back in the United States for the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Circuit of the Americas. And once again, it didn't happen in Mexico. It almost certainly is going to happen this weekend. Lewis Hamilton going for his 6th overall World Championship and 5th in the last 6 seasons.
Wow.
Just incredible what that Mercedes team have done. So for Doyoung Lee, thanks again for being a part of the show tonight.
Thank you.
I'm Ben Schneider, and we'll see y'all next week. Have a good night, everybody.